When I play with the Charlie Daniels Band, I don't just show up and pick up an instrument and start playing. Band members have to prepare for the show, have to practice and dedicate themselves to their art in order to put in a good performance. The same applies to crane operators.
This program is part 2 of a 3-part series on the safe operation of shoreside container gantry cranes. In part 2, you'll learn what you need to know and how to be prepared before operating a shoreside container gantry crane. We'll cover the pre-operation inspection, entering the cab, and how to perform an equipment check. Methods of communicating with ground personnel will be explained. Crane movements, including gantry and trolley, will be discussed, as well as basic load handling. And finally, you'll learn how to work with chassis.
Before stepping on a stage, rock musicians prepare by working out a song until everybody gets it right, and by getting mentally ready for the show. As a crane operator, you need to be prepared too.
First, before setting foot in the cab, you need to be sure you have your personal safety in check. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, has issued regulations for crane operators. You may not operate a shoreside crane if you have uncorrected impaired vision or hearing, or if you suffer from heart disease, epilepsy, or any similar ailment that could suddenly incapacitate you. Your local port may have other qualifications that you must satisfy in order to operate a shoreside container gantry crane. Never operate a crane while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. If you are taking prescribed medications, you must be cleared to operate a crane. Appropriate work clothing is required, which includes shirt, pants, and work shoes. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, may be required for pedestrians or people working in certain locations. This PPE may include a hard hat, reflective vest, and safety shoes. For instance, if you come out of your crane and enter a pedestrian walkway, you are required to wear a reflective vest. If you are walking under the crane, you must wear a hard hat. You will be instructed on any other PPE requirements. Cell phones, music, and personal entertainment devices are all potentially dangerous distractions and are not permitted on the job. Books, newspapers, and food are also prohibited. Your full attention is needed when operating the crane. Be alert at all times. Only operate cranes that you are fully trained and certified to operate, unless you are under the direct supervision of a trainer. Never allow an unauthorized person to operate your crane. Before you climb into the cab, know the manufacturer's recommendations for safe operation. Know your crane's limits, such as the safe working load that the crane can handle. The safe working load is clearly marked on the wall of the cab and on each portal beam. Never exceed the safe working load of the crane you are operating. In addition, wind speed limits are set for the safe operation of the crane. Know these limits, how to determine them, and what to do when and if they occur. Instructions will be posted in your crane's cab. Know your terminal's procedures for pre-shift information sessions or briefings. In these briefings, you will be instructed on what you are to accomplish during your shift and any unusual circumstances you should be aware of. The shoreside container gantry crane is equipped with many safety features that you should be familiar with. One of the most important safety features is the emergency stop button that is used to immediately stop the crane and shut off power to all functions. There are several large red emergency stop buttons on the crane. One is located in the cab on either the right or left console. Also, an emergency stop button is located on each of the crane legs. Use emergency stop buttons in emergency situations only. Limit switches are devices that automatically slow down or stop the motion of the crane. There are slow down and stop limit switches for the hoist, trolley, boom, and in some models, the gantry movement. Limit switches should never be used as crane operating tools. Do not blindly trust limit switches. When the crane gantries, audible alarms will sound. Some cranes also have flashing lights to alert ground personnel that the crane is moving. Shoreside cranes have collision bumpers at each of the 4 legs. There are also collision bumpers at the end of the crane track. The bumpers will absorb some of the shock if the crane accidentally gantries into another crane or the end of the track. You should not rely on these bumpers when you gantry. It is always up to you to make certain it is safe to move the crane. If you notice a malfunction or problem with any of these safety features, contact maintenance or appropriate personnel immediately.
Before a band starts a show, they tune their instruments to make sure their music will sound its best. Cranes also need to be thoroughly tuned or inspected to make sure they'll work their best.
At most terminals, the pre-op inspection is conducted by maintenance personnel. But you should be aware of what they do to ensure the safe operation of the machine. During a pre-op inspection, crane mechanics perform visual and mechanical checks. A checklist outlining these procedures is generally provided. First, an overall visual inspection of the crane is done. Mechanics walk around the crane looking for damage, defects, or unusual wear. When cranes are not in use, they're secured at tie-down locations. When the crane is secured, the conventional boom is raised or the shuttle boom is retracted. To prepare a crane for work, crane maintenance personnel must release the tie-downs and lift the stowage pins. They also check for damage to the crane at dock level and for fluid leaks. Hoist ropes, their drums and shivs, motors, brakes, the spreader, the umbilical cord, festoon cable, limit switches, and the crane structure are some of the items that are checked during the pre-op inspections. After checking these and other items, mechanics will lower the conventional boom or extend the shuttle boom. They also check electric circuits, computers, and other components in the machinery house. Mechanics will check that the gantry, trolley, and hoist functions are fully operational and that limit switches are functioning properly. They will confirm that all other cab controls and indicator lights are working correctly. If a defect is noted, it will either be repaired right away or noted for future repair if the crane can be safely operated. At most facilities, cranes are started by maintenance personnel. If crane operators start their machines at your facility, your local training will instruct you on appropriate starting procedures. At some terminals, maintenance personnel may also position the crane where work is to begin. Once the crane is started and maintenance has determined there are no problems, you are ready to begin operations. However, the final check is yours. You should perform the following visual inspections. Look around the tracks for obstructions such as debris, people, cargo, equipment, or parked vehicles. Make sure all tie-downs and stowage pins are removed. Always look for fluid leaks, since they might signal a problem. Check the moving parts of the crane and report defects immediately. Crane ropes, the spreader, and any other lifting attachments should be checked.
As the band gets closer to showtime, they need to do a sound check by going over all the controls on the soundboard to make sure they have the right mix of sounds. You need to check out your cab and its controls too.
Access the crane's cab using only the designated walkways, platforms, steps, ladders, or elevator. Be cautious while climbing the ladder. Always use a three-point stance. This means that there will always be 3 points of contact between you and the ladder, either 2 feet in one hand or 2 hands in 1 foot. Grab the sides of the ladder, not the rungs. Do not carry anything in your hands when climbing up or down the ladder, and do not rush. Ladders, stairs, and walkways may be slippery from rain, oil, or moisture, so proceed cautiously. Make sure that your work shoes are clean and free of grease. Give yourself enough time to stop and rest if you need to. Be very careful in bad weather. Ice, wind, and rain can cause safety hazards. If your crane has an elevator, be sure the doors to the elevator and the landing are completely closed after you have used it, so that it will be available for other personnel. The elevator will not move if the doors are left open. Do not interfere with the electrical safety interlocks on the doors. If you're accessing a crane during a shift change, make sure the operator knows that you are coming to the cab. The exiting operator should discontinue all operations, park the cab, exit, and meet you at the access walkway. If the crane is equipped with a lockout feature, the exiting operator should engage it before leaving the cab so the trolley cannot move while operators are on the access walkway. On cranes without a lockout feature, you should check that the exiting operator is out of the seat and push the emergency stop button if one is located at the trolley park position, then enter the cab. The exiting operator should tell you about any unusual conditions on the job or with the crane. He or she should reset the emergency stop button, if there is one, at the trolley park position as he or she leaves. Otherwise, you should allow the exiting operator sufficient time to get fully off the crane. Your local training will inform you about specific shift change procedures for your terminal. Once you're in the operator's cab, inspect it looking for debris on the floor that could obstruct your vision or impede safe operation. Clean the windows if needed. Next, sit comfortably in the seat. If the crane is equipped with seat belts or harnesses, use them properly. The operator's seat is positioned in the cab so that the operator faces the forward trolley direction. However, safe and efficient operation requires the operator to look around in all directions. Some operators' seats can swivel for this purpose. If the power to the cab is not on, then hit the control power on button located on one of the control consoles. Perform a visual check of your operating environment. Look for potential hazards, things that the crane might hit when you gantry or trolley, such as the ship's radar, masts, gangways, ramps, and exhaust stack. Check for anyone who might be working in the machinery house, on the boom, the trolley, or on the ladder of your crane. Familiarize yourself with the traffic patterns under the crane. There may be traffic that is not involved in the loading of the same ship and therefore not in communication with your gang. Make sure all gang members are accounted for and ready to begin. Before you begin any work, conduct an equipment check. Be thorough. Your safety and that of others depends on it. Check all crane motion controls for proper operation. These are located on the control levers. Check the crane's drive functions first. These include gantry, forward and reverse trolley, and spreader hoist and lower. Make sure limit switches are working. Do not operate gantry, trolley, or hoist functions unless the boom is properly positioned in the operational position. Check that the crane's drive functions slow or brake as usual. The gantry, trolley, and hoist systems are slowed to a stop, and the brakes are applied when the control levers are returned to the off or the neutral position. When the gantry control lever is returned to the off or neutral position, the crane's wheels stop because they are not receiving power from the motors. If you are moving too fast when the gantry brakes are applied, the spreader will swing dramatically side to side. All operators must be aware of this and must know how to bring the machine to a smooth stop. Next, cycle the spreader through its functions. Extend and retract it and move the flippers up and down. Now, with all of the controls in the off or neutral position, press the emergency stop. Check to make sure controls are disabled. Report any problems you discover. The communication systems on the crane are vital to your safety. It is your direct line to your co-workers. Check the radio to make sure you have contact with ground personnel. Is the cab speaker working? What about the external loudspeaker? If your crane is equipped with a computer, make certain the monitor is on and the display panel is operative. The monitor will give a readout of any functions that need attention. However, this does not take the place of your checks. Some cranes have video cameras to help with ground level visibility. If so, make sure the camera is operable. Continue your check by testing all warning devices. The horn, audible travel alarms, and warning lights must all be operational. Don't forget to check the windshield wipers and floodlights used during night operations. If you see, feel, or hear any problems, report them immediately.
Think what would happen if every member of a rock band decided to play a different song or in a different key. Just like a band, communication with your team is vital for a smooth performance.
In order to work safely and efficiently, it is important to maintain visual contact with all of your gang. Blind spots, such as in the front of and under the load, can be a safety hazard if you look away from your load momentarily or are not paying attention to the signal person. Be alert at all times. The signal person will use a radio to communicate important information to you. Remember that radios are not for general conversation. They are to be used for operations communication only. Hand signals may be used in addition to radio communication. Hand signals should only be taken from one authorized person, except for the stop signal. For safety reasons, the stop signal should be obeyed no matter who gives it. Do not move the crane if you don't understand or are unsure of a signal. There are many hand signals for the crane operator, and they may vary from terminal to terminal. It is important that you understand the hand signals used at your terminal. The following hand signals are recognized by the ANSI B30 standard and may be used at your workplace. Raise hoist. The forearm is vertical with one finger pointing up and drawing a small circle in the sky. Lower hoist. The arm is extended downward with one finger drawing a small circle toward the ground. Travel. The arm is extended forward with the hand open and slightly raised, making a pushing motion in the direction of travel. Trolley. The hand is closed and the thumb points in the direction of motion. The hand is jerked horizontally. Stop. The arm is extended palm down and moved back and forth horizontally. Emergency stop. Both arms are extended palms down and moved back and forth horizontally. Move slowly. The other hand is placed in front of the hand making the intended signal. Take it easy. Palms are rubbed in a circular motion. Extend the spreader. The hands are placed in front of the chest and moved apart. Retract the spreader. The hands are placed in front of the chest and moved together. Move spreader twist lock. The hand is moved in a motion that looks like it is turning a light bulb upward. Move the flippers. The arm is out and the elbow is bent. Whenever possible, the signal person should signal using bare hands. However, in cold weather, your signal person may need to wear gloves. Although light-colored or high-visibility gloves are preferred, the signal person may wear dark gloves as long as the crane operator can clearly see the hand signals being communicated. Although this may seem like a lot of hand signals to remember, with time and practice, they will become second nature.
Now, I do love playing to an audience and hearing their applause. It's an incredible feeling, but I never would have gotten to that point in my career if I hadn't learned and practiced the basics. In order to perform well at your job, you also need to learn and practice basic maneuvers.
Considering the tremendous size and weight of the shoreside container gantry crane, the fact that it can travel from place to place is impressive. Learning to move or gantry a machine of this size takes skill and practice. Gantry movement can be awkward because the cab faces forward, but you must look to the left or right in the direction of your travel. Before you gantry, make sure the tracks are clear of debris, vehicles, and personnel. It's also important to make sure the crane structure and boom are clear of the ship before you travel. Never gantry the crane or perform any other crane operations while a ship is moving. Typically, while a ship is moving to or from the dock, the crane should be out of the berthing area, if possible, and the boom should be in the stowed position. After you've checked the tracks and get the verbal or visual sign that it is clear to move, gantry the crane using the gantry control lever, which is typically located on the right control console. The gantry control lever is stepless or continuously variable, which means that the further you push or pull the lever from the off or neutral position, the faster the movement. The control lever is also self-centering, which means that it will return to the off or neutral position when you release the lever. Move the gantry control lever in the direction you need to travel, either left or right. The further the movement of the lever, the greater the gantry speed. Start every gantry movement slowly and gradually increase speed. Full gantry speed on most cranes is 150 feet per minute. As you gantry the crane, audible alarms will sound. On cranes equipped with gantry motion warning lights, the lights will flash when you travel. This should continue as you travel. When you gantry, keep your eyes on the ground or on the video monitor at all times. Ask for help to ensure that no obstacles are in your blind spots. When you gantry while the cab is positioned over the ship, you will not be able to see the tracks. Maintain contact with the signal person to ensure that the tracks remain clear. Gantry the crane into position at the hold or bay where container movements are to occur. Align the crane with the row of containers on the ship where you will be loading or discharging containers. As you approach your destination, decrease your gantry speed. Do not stop suddenly or throw the control lever from one direction to another. Bring the control lever to the off or neutral position first if you need to change direction. Whenever you move the crane, the spreader will move too. When you stop, the spreader wants to keep going like a pendulum. This movement of the spreader is called swing. At the end of travel or gantry movement, slow down to help eliminate the swing of the spreader in order to control it and keep it from damaging nearby containers or ship structures. Keeping the spreader high while you gantry will help. With practice, you will learn the proper speed to gantry to keep the spreader from swinging too much and causing unnecessary wear on the machine. Moving containers from one place to another is what cranes are all about. It takes coordination to hoist and trolley containers. Experienced crane operators can hoist and trolley simultaneously. To explain the hoist and trolley functions, we will demonstrate each one step by step. However, once you are an experienced operator, this process will flow naturally. Once you gantry the crane to align it with the container row you're going to work, you need to position the spreader over the container to be lifted. To trolley, use the trolley control lever, which is typically located on the left control console. Push the control lever forward to move toward the ship and pull back to move the trolley and spreader back toward the land side. Like the gantry control lever, the trolley control lever is also stepless or continuously variable, as well as self-centering. Moving the trolley control lever forward or back will make the trolley move. The further you move it, the faster the trolley will go. If you return the control lever to the off or neutral position, the trolley will stop. Unless you have been moving the trolley very slowly, at the end of trolley movement, the spreader will be swinging. You must eliminate the swing before lowering the spreader. Now that you have trolleyed the spreader to the correct position and eliminated the swing, you may need to extend or retract the spreader to the length of the container to be lifted. Experienced operators can do this while they trolley. Extending or retracting the spreader is done by moving the spreader extend-retract control to the left or right. Don't land the spreader until it is fully extended or retracted to the correct size. Some cranes have a light on the control panel that tells you when the spreader is at the right length. Others will require you to look at the spreader to check the length. To lower the spreader onto the container, use the hoist control lever. This lever is also stepless or continuously variable. Push the lever forward to lower the spreader. Pull the lever back to raise the spreader. As you have learned, the spreader is equipped with aligning arms called flippers. Once you've aligned the spreader using the flippers, land the spreader onto the container. Spreaders have a system that determines when they are positioned properly on top of the container. The twist locks will work only when the spreader is in the proper position. The system is called the spreader-seated system. When you lower a spreader onto a container, there are 4 plungers which hang down below the bottom of the 4 corners of the spreader. When the spreader is fully landed on top of the container, all 4 of the plungers will be pushed up by contact with the top of the container. This will enable the spreader-seated light, which is usually amber in color, to come on to indicate that the spreader is properly seated. The twist locks may be locked at this time. On some cranes, the locking of the twist locks is automatic. On most cranes, the crane operator has to lock the twist locks. A locked light will come on to tell you that the container is fully locked to the spreader. You will not be able to hoist until the lock light comes on. Raise your flippers as soon as the twist locks are locked, making sure they're clear of any obstacles before doing so. Raise the container slowly with your hoist control lever until you have the full weight of the container and all slack is out of the hoist rope. Avoid rapid stops and starts and jerking or snatching the container. This causes a shock load on the entire crane and can eventually lead to damage and premature wear to the hoist ropes and other components of the crane. Be sure you lift every container evenly and high enough to clear all obstacles. Never carry loads or containers over the heads of people. Never lift a container that is heavier than the safe working load of the crane. Never bump or drag a container. Also, never leave the controls of your crane while a container is suspended. After the container has been lifted, you can trolley it to its new location. Start slowly and gradually increase speed. Now that you are carrying a container, it is even more important to eliminate the swing or catch the swing once you have trolleyed the container to its destination. A swinging container may be damaged, or it may cause damage if it comes in contact with other equipment or structures. Once you have eliminated the swing, lower the container into position. Lower slowly. When the container is landed, make sure the hoist wire ropes have a little slack in them. Then, unlock the twist locks and lift the spreader from the container. Now you can trolley back to retrieve another container. Yard tractors will pull up between the legs of the crane to deliver or receive containers. The driver will be signaled to stop, and you will get the signal to start lowering or lifting the container. Drivers must remain in their cab during the entire process of delivering or receiving a container. Before landing a container on a chassis, stop the container just above it to allow the twist locks engaged in the bottom corner fittings of the container to be removed. When all workers are out of the way, and when signaled to do so, land the container on the chassis, Unlock the spreader twist locks and release the container. Lift the spreader slowly at first, making certain that the spreader twist locks are unlocked. When hoisting a container from a chassis, lift the container 1 or 2 feet above the chassis to make sure that the container is fully disengaged from the chassis. If the container is to be stowed on deck, twist locks will need to be inserted into the 4 bottom corner fittings. When you get the signal that it is safe to lift, hoist and trolley to the location where the container will be stowed. While container handling may seem like a complicated process, you will soon be delivering containers smoothly and efficiently. As you know, to become skilled at something, it takes practice. In this program, you learned what you need to know before operating a crane. We also covered the pre-operation inspection, entering the cab, and how to perform an equipment check. You learned how to communicate properly with everyone on your team. We discussed gantry and trolley, and we explained basic load handling procedures. Lastly, you learned how to work with chassis.
I guess operating a crane's a little bit like putting on a show. What I put into a performance is what comes out of it. And that means taking all the right steps to prepare and practicing the basics. Bands may play the same old songs every show, but every time they get on stage, they have to give it 100%. Let me encourage you to do the same. Give it your best effort and give a great performance.